Loneliness. Something that I have spoken about quite a lot on and off over the years. Sometimes when referring to my past experiences, as well as addressing the issue in and of itself, given the fact that, especially in this day and age, does tend to affect a lot more people than it once upon a time used to, that combined with the obvious, which is, of course, that a lot of elderly people suffer more than most. I mean, statistics continuously seem to show that people over 50, a lot of them will end up feeling long periods of loneliness, etc. And it's exacerbated, of course, when a partner passes away and whatnot, when they reach much elderly in years. But there's a difference between bouts of loneliness, and I'm sure everybody at some point has had bouts of loneliness themselves, but sometimes you might not necessarily even realize that you were going through a bout of loneliness. Something could occur in your life, something drastic or just whatever it may be, but it passes. It's a feeling. There's a difference between that and what can over time become chronic loneliness. And over the past few years, sort of watching my grandmother's cognitive abilities decline ever since my granddad passed away several years ago now. We put it down to like old age to begin with. Old people forget things, etc. But as time has progressed, she has got worse and worse. She's not yet at a point where it would be grounds for her herself to concede there's a problem. She's still very much of the belief that there's nothing wrong, despite the fact they're coming in thick and fast, example wise, in terms of her wandering out in the middle of the night thinking it's daytime, or going to appointments on the wrong day and whatnot, fucking falling asleep multiple times a day, waking up thinking it's a different day. I mean, her calendar, just on a side note, is just scribbled out nonsense everywhere. There's no space for anything else to be put into it. She's asked me on multiple occasions if I've ever met my granddad before. She's also on multiple occasions referred to me as my granddad. She thinks there's men living in the house and whatnot. And it's sad to see. This isn't just old age. But over the years as this has occurred, I wasn't oblivious to the fact that loneliness is obviously playing a factor. And I mean, this principle applies to anybody, irrespective of circumstance. And what I'm about to say, for example, somebody could be going through a bad breakup. Somebody could have lost a loved one. Somebody could have lost their pets, whatever it may be. So people will take it upon themselves to try and cheer them up. Let's invite so-and-so out for the day. Let's invite so-and-so down for the weekend, whatever it may be. Right? But the second that person goes back to their house and that door closes, immediately it starts again. And I often used to sort of feel somewhat sorry for my grandmother in that regard, because we still go over, but we would go over. And, even if we stayed there all afternoon, the second we left the house, when that door closed, she's back to doing nothing in the house by herself. Even taking the dementia out of the equation, that'll be enough to drive anybody to despair over time. So I do think that loneliness in that regard has played a role, or it's accelerated my grandmother's cognitive decline. It again comes back to the difference between bouts of loneliness and when it becomes chronic loneliness. And chronic loneliness is described as when feelings of loneliness and uncomfortable social isolation, or feelings of social isolation, which can go on for long periods of time. It's characterized by constant and unrelenting feelings of being alone, separated or divided from others, and an inability to connect on a deeper level. It can also be accompanied by deeply rooted feelings of self-doubt, low self-esteem, or social anxiety, and in some instances it can push people towards substance abuse, etc. I mean, it goes from a feeling to an illness over time, and I'm no stranger to it either, really. I mean, I'm 29 years of age. I'm going to be 30 quite soon. And I had to learn the hard way that the sort of distraction that I had for quite a few years wasn't healthy. And what I mean by that is that prior to me and my ex-partner being a thing, you know, I didn't particularly have the greatest social life. I sort of distanced myself away from the life that I used to live as a teenager in order to better myself. But it came at a cost because it meant that obviously I wouldn't go out with the people that I used to associate with when I was in my late teens. Henceforth, I would stay in the house a lot. And I ended up becoming somewhat socially isolated apart from when I was at work. And during the lockdown period, I joined Telegram and whatnot. And I made friends on Telegram, but it's just the internet. And that's what I'm saying. It's like I learned the hard way. I had to learn the hard way, but I'm glad I did learn. Just wish it wasn't so fucking hard. But I had to learn the hard way that that's not healthy because there's a lot of people who are in my position who still are in that position where the highlight of their weekend or the highlight of their evening is tuning into Telegram or tuning into live streams on YouTube to converse with people in the comment sections to distract them from the fact that without that, they don't necessarily have the greatest of social lives, if any life at all. It's not healthy. It's not healthy at all. Albeit the alternative in my case is, albeit, yeah, I learned the hard way and I realized that that's not a healthy way to live. The alternative is that I am now yet again experiencing exactly what I used to experience prior to me joining Telegram to begin with. But this is what I'm trying to get at with this video here, that loneliness does become something that really does eat away at you. It's not a great fucking experience at all. You know, I'm trying to like analyze myself, and there's been a clear decline in my health this year. The first step that I had to make at the start of the year was I had to stop drinking every day because that's what I was doing the latter half of last year. You know, summer going into autumn, and then fucking hell, during winter, I was drunk so much every day. So that was the first thing I had to do this year. And I was somewhat successful in that regard. I've gone from being like a binge drinking alcoholic dickhead to somebody who can go weeks and weeks and weeks now without any alcohol. But if that was the only issue that I had to deal with, then fucking hell, that would be great. But it's the weeks at times of sitting in my house, or even if I go out with my dog, it's just me sat watching shit on YouTube. And I've become more and more distant as time is going on. You know, and I mean, every website you go on when it refers to chronic loneliness, you know, inability to connect with others on a deeper, more intimate level. You've got no closer best friends. You might have friends, but they are casual friends or acquaintances, and you feel you can find no one who truly gets you. In order for you to be able to determine whether or not somebody could truly get you, you'd have to converse with people in the fucking first place. And obviously, the overwhelming feelings of isolation, you know. And that actually does have effects. It's affected me even when I'm in people's company. That never really used to be something that impacted me per se back in the day. But I still feel odd and out of place when I'm in people's company. I'm always the quiet one, you know. I can sit there for hours in the company of other people and I barely speak. You know, always overthinking, stuff like that. Negative feelings of self-doubt and self-worth, exhaustion and burnout. Yeah, I can write. Loss of appetite, lack of motivation. You know, the amount of jobs I've had this year are fucking, it's not being great. But that's mainly my doing at this point because I've just stopped putting the effort in. You know, I barely shave, barely get my hair cut, I barely fucking go out. You know, in the last like 2 months or so, prior to my phone breaking, I was just starting to ignore everybody. Some people would phone me at the weekends and whatnot, and I just ignored them. You know, sort of embracing the rut that was being perpetuated due to the mindset that I had. It is a horrible feeling, loneliness, really. Like when it becomes that bad, you know, if I was to post something on my Facebook, for example, I don't go onto Facebook, but if I was, I could post something on my Facebook. I don't get any interactions. You know? Put it in the context, y'all. This year, I could probably count and have a couple of fingers left over with the amount of people that I have spoken to via my phone this year. And we're in fucking October now. Yeah. Very, very, very little interaction with people. Weeks and weeks of fucking total isolation. And I do think that, albeit I'm not an avid binge drinker anymore, I have become unwell. And I think loneliness is the reason for that, by and large. At the very beginning of this year, I had 2 objectives. And I said that when I came off Telegram. I said that I wanted to stop the fucking drink, like properly stop drinking every day. And in time, upon, you know, achieving a semblance of healthiness, I wanted to try and pursue routes to see my son. And then clarity began to emerge as the months went on that I ain't going to be able to fucking see my son. And albeit I don't get pissed every single day, I actually, funnily enough, feel worse than I ever did. And the other issues with loneliness is the fact that not only does it affect your sleep and your mental health, this is when it's chronic, I mean, but it can lead to depression, obviously. It can lead to anxiety issues. It can lead to muscle weakness. It can lead to higher blood pressure. It can lead to weight gain. It can, in time, begin to affect your concentration levels. It also increases your chances of heart disease. And obviously, the longer it goes on, it can lead to substance abuse, can be exacerbated by substance abuse. It can lead to dementia in time if you're an elderly person. It's not something that I think gets spoken about enough. When I have spoken about it over the years on my channel and whatnot, I've never really spoken about it from my perspective. I've spoken about it in its entirety. You know, it's a sad reality that a lot of elderly people experience this more than most. But it's also a damning indictment of society that there's a lot more people that are a lot younger that are beginning to experience this. And questions obviously should be asked as to how that is the case or why that is the case. More fundamentally, I think it's a worry in and of itself because if left unchecked, there's a lot of other people out there that are going to end up potentially coming down with additional issues that have been brought about due to said loneliness. I can't put it into words how awful it feels at times to spend days and days and days just sat in my fucking room. You know, I've seen me at times this year going a week without a fucking shower. And then just sit in my room, barely move, sleep. That's about it. It's not healthy. It's not healthy at all. But yeah, I don't know. As I say, I look at my gran and I know I used to fucking know how she felt from an empathic, perspective. But now I'm sort of living the same sort of life that she's living in terms of how it makes me feel, how it makes her feel. And it's horrible, really. But yeah, I wouldn't wish this on anybody, be honest, but I don't know. I don't know, man. You know, the last time I spoke to somebody was yesterday. Well, we're almost in Sunday, so Friday at like 11 in the morning on the phone for like half an hour. And that was it. When I've just been sat in my fucking room. I don't know. So yeah. To conclude, I do think a larger conversation, not by me, but just in general, needs to be had in regards to loneliness as a feeling and how it can, over time, become chronic in nature. Yeah. Adios.